everyone. Welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, a podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, game masters, and enthusiasts like myself and Josh. I am Dan.
I am Josh.
And tonight we are going to talk about all things geographical and one thing quizzical, because we have one email to get to first. But after that email, we are going to dive deep into Cara Fahd geography, because it just needs some love, and we got to talk about orcs, because it has been way too long since we talked about orcs.
Orcs are great.
They are, and I have a friend who plays nothing but orcs, so I got to give them as much love as possible, because that's just the way I am. Anyway, so before that, we have one email that came in from a listener who goes by Insaniac99, and 9s are just cool, so dig that one right there. Thanks for doing a great podcast. Half of that's Josh, half of that's me. In your episode from Minbruges and Thistonius, you talked about not being sure how a quester of Garland might go too far, except via Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Well, I have a couple of other ideas on how a quester might go too far. First, from the more traditional aspect of not wanting to see people in pain and healing that pain, you could get helicopter parents, or any other overprotective archetype that doesn't allow their charges to be put at risk in the first place. Even being a simple, consistent, nagging worrywart, such as the type of person who might say, "Don't forget your dwarven winter night cloaks," to which the reply, of course, is, "But Quester, it's 90 degrees out, there isn't a cloud in the sky," might be an example. The second way is similar, but involves the protector of hearth and home angle rather than the healer. A protector can easily be overzealous, whether being overaggressive against even the least hostile threats, or even keeping minor threats away. An overzealous protector might, for example, keep Gandalf away from visiting Bilbo in the first place because Gandalf puts Bilbo in quite a bit of harm. One might even see where a twisted view results in keeping Danae, Perseus' mother, in the brass tower or bronze chamber depending on version. So she might not give birth to the son who is prophesied to kill King Acrisius. Thanks again for the great podcast. I hope this sparks some fun conversation.
It's all good.
Thoughts,
Great
Josh?
ideas. Yeah.
Yeah. I had, just in reading that, I came across, I was reminded of the movie Everything, Everything, where if you've never seen it, it's a love story, but the mother of the girl who can't leave the house because she's got this rare disease doesn't actually have this rare disease. Spoiling a movie for you.
Oh.
Yes.
It's just called Everything.
Everything.
It's just once. That's why I was confused, because you said it twice.
No, I think it's called Everything, Everything. That's what I thought it was. Everything, Everything? Anyway, that's the name of the book. And it's based upon. So that's another way you could do it, where she lost her husband due to a car accident, doesn't want her daughter to leave the house, so makes up this whole made-up syndrome that she actually has. It's a low immune system, therefore can't leave the house, and so forth and so on.
That's not what it's called.
That's not what it's called?
It's not the name of the movie. It's not what the name of the movie is.
Then what is it? I swear it was Everything, Everything. I have it on DVD downstairs.
Oh, okay. No, you're right.
Okay.
You're right. You're right. There is a
I'm
movie
not
called
often right.
It is called
Dang
Everything.
it. No.
I am thinking of a completely different movie that has a very similar premise that was out more recently
Fair.
that I cannot remember the name of now off the top of my head.
Gotcha.
No, Everything. You are right. I just looked it up on IMDb.
Nope, fair. It was in the last 3 or 4 years, so I...
Yeah. It came out in 2017.
Yeah, I was right. I'm rarely right.
There is one that came out more recently that I cannot remember the name of right now, but it involved, I don't know.
We will sign off after this is all done, and Josh will remember it with the mics turned off.
It came out like a couple of months ago, I think. And I'm trying to remember the actress that was in it, because she's awesome, who plays the mother in it. Mm-hmm. And I'm just sitting here scrolling through IMDb, and I'm not gonna... I don't know.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so apologies. You are correct about Everything. That is not the movie that I was thinking of.
I will take my win, though. I will take my win. I get so few wins against Josh. I'll take my win.
Wait. I think I know. Hold on. If you want to vamp while I'm looking this up.
Well, it's an audio podcast. I'll sit over here and do my happy dance. Nobody can see me.
I wonder... I think it's her.
Who's the actress?
Sarah Paulson.
Oh, I love Sarah Paulson.
Yes, it is. Okay, the name of the movie that I was thinking of...
here we go.
Which came out in 2020 is called Run.
Huh. Okay.
Which is a very similar premise. It's about a mother who is keeping the daughter safe. And it's more of a thriller, whereas I think Everything is more of a
It's a love story.
Yeah, it's more of a love, like everything is probably along the lines of The Fault in Our Stars.
You are correct.
Like it's in that genre, which is
It's a young adult
fantastic.
novel.
Like that's a great genre.
Yeah.
But Run is more of a thriller where the mother was keeping the daughter sequestered because of an illness or some sort, and there were darker things going on.
What? No.
So that's what I was thinking of. I knew I would figure. I'm like, I know the actress. Wait, was she in that? And I went and I'm like, yes.
Yes.
That's who it was. Sarah Paulson, who is
Always wonderful.
always wonderful.
From her stint on Studio 60 to her stint on American Horror Story.
That's what I looked up. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was the actress from. She plays Nurse Ratched in that Ratched miniseries that's inspired by
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Yes. She's been in like American Horror Story.
She's one of my wife's favorite actresses.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
Always. And she deserves every award she's ever gotten and will get. So we digress. However, we had time to fill. So we are going to talk about now. Thank you, by the way, Insomniac99, if I got your name right. Anyway, keep the questions coming. We love them. So if you have your own question, feel free to contact us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. We put that everywhere, just about in every single episode. It's on the Earthdawn Guild. You can find us on Twitter. If you don't know where to find us, you're not looking hard enough. Anyway, so we are going to talk about the geography of maybe taking your campaign and or your player characters into Cara Fahd. And the first thing I want to tell you about the map of Cara Fahd is that really you could just use this map for a whole campaign world and never need anything else, because this has literally everything. It has rivers, has the corner of an ocean, it has volcanoes, it has part of Death Sea, it has the Twilight Peaks, it has plains, it has jungles, it has grassland, it has, what doesn't this map have? It's a little tiny microcosm of Barsave itself.
Yeah.
I was just impressed with, wow, this is really, you don't really need a secondary map. You can take your party here and leave them here until they hit 15th circle and retire and never need to go anywhere else, because what can't you do in Cara Fahd as far as the terrain is concerned?
Okay, as far as the terrain is concerned, now I was going to say you can't overthrow the Theran Empire in Cara Fahd.
Exactly. However, so
you can't shatter the Malachite seat into 1,000 pieces.
No.
In Cara Fahd.
No, but this has the capital city.
You can't restore Oakheart in Cara Fahd.
No. Anymore?
There are a bunch of things that you actually can't do in Cara Fahd.
Exactly.
But Cara Fahd is awesome.
Cara Fahd is
because it's full of orcs.
fantastic.
And as has been previously mentioned, orcs are great.
Yes. It is 75% populated by orcs. And it even has little spots for windlings that are written about in this massive book, but are not necessarily for Obsidian. So the ends of the spectrum are there. But it does have a capital city. It does have the Delaris Mountains to the northwest that are steep and silent. It has Rockhorn troll moots on there as well. So you've got neighbors for trolls and troll moots. You've got mountains to the north and the east and a volcano to the east as well. You've got rivers all around, patches of forest, jungles in the center and the southeast, plains between Vivane and the Greenheart River, and Savannah due to your west. Seriously.
Yeah.
Everything is there. You don't need another map. You could take this map and put it in any other game you wanted to.
Especially when you include a little bit of the area around Cara Fahd.
Yes.
Once you include the Delaris Mountains, the Twilight Peaks, which are just off to the east there.
Yeah.
You've got Vivane and Sky Point, depending on what area you're setting it in, maybe the ruins of Vivane and Sky Point. Presence of the Theran Empire to a greater or lesser extent, because even though their military base at Sky Point is gone in the 4th edition sort of official timeline, they are still in Rugaria. They aren't that far from what's going on. And then while you certainly have plenty of ruins and stuff in the southern jungles, you've also got Ustrecht just on the other side of the pass there between the Delaris and Twilight Peaks.
Yeah.
Which is the ruined kingdom of the troll culture from Ustrecht was there as a ruined nation. You've got Landis to the south, and the tension along the border between Cara Fahd and Landis, the traditional rivalry between the orc nation and the human nation.
Yeah.
There is a lot of potential. There is a lot of fantastic, amazing story potential in Cara Fahd.
There is.
And there is a whole bunch of different terrain types that you can have there. You're right. Again, you've got Death's Sea nearby.
Mm-hmm.
Cara Fahd kind of edges up against the Twilight Peaks in Death's Sea. You go far enough south, you get outside of the lava area and you get down to the water section that some maps show of the area known as Death's Sea.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on.
Totally.
It's really cool.
It is. And I'm going to have Josh wax rhapsodic on this one as well because he's infinitely more knowledgeable and has a much better memory than I do. There is just not a lot written about Landis.
No.
There's almost nothing written in this book at all. There's nothing written, I think, in the player's guide or the game master's guide. You had to go back to the Sky Point and Vivane boxed set to find like a page. And that's it. There's a page.
I am not 100% sure. I may, this is sort of like one of my questions for Lou. I like to remind myself whether this was the case or not.
Fair.
I seem to recall at some point Lou Prosperi mentioning that one of the reasons potentially that Landis never saw a whole lot of development was because it was sort of intended as an area left more open for game masters to develop on their own.
Oh, gotcha.
Rather than provide a whole bunch of setting book level detail like we got with Thrall, like we got with Parlanthe, like we got with
Sky Point and Vivane even.
Vivane and Sky Point. Like we eventually got with Cara Fahd and
Kratos.
Well, and the Crystal Raiders. Talking about sort of the first edition era of things.
I got ahead of you.
But also part of the development plan for first edition was looking at talking about events. We had like kind of stuff leading up that first phase 1 of first edition, which was initially a lot of laying the basic groundwork for Barsave as a whole and exploring some of the and presenting some of the stuff that was going on there with presenting the Serpent River, presenting Thrall, presenting the Barsave box set in general, presenting just some information that
fleshed out the
details, map. That kind of fills out the map and lays some of the seeds and some of the stuff that leads up to the arrival of the Triumph and the events of Prelude to War. And then post Prelude to War, the idea being, okay, that's our first event, sort of the culmination of phase 1 to talk in development terms here.
Totally.
Then we get phase 2, which ultimately would have closed out with Barsave at War, the product that was sort of in outline phase at the time that first edition Earthdawn was shut down.
Yeah.
And the books that were produced between Prelude to War and Barsave at War were ones that, yes, did continue to fill out the map in a sense, but also were important in the story that was being developed. And there's a little bit of back and forth kind of between that, which was, okay, what are areas that we haven't explored yet from a source book standpoint? How can we make them important to the ongoing story of what's happening with Barsave and the lead up to this next big event?
Yeah.
And obviously, because of the plans, if anybody's seen the outline for Barsave at War, the original outline that was out there upon which the Living Room Games version was based and upon which the 4th edition timeline updates were also based to a certain extent. But we have Cara Fahd, who is very important in the military assault on Sky Point.
Yes.
We've got the trolls and the airship kind of stuff that goes along with them, the Twilight Peaks. Also important because the assistance of the trolls is important on the assault on Triumph. And also on Sky Point, we've got the Dragons source book, which does more to explore the continued lurking threat of the Denerastus and setting up both the dragons' involvement in the war and looking outward a little bit towards what would have been the third phase, which is Thera having been ousted and the Denerastus and the machinations of the Outcast being more prominent in terms of setting development. But I think it was always a kind of situation where Landis was kind of left as an area that was not really developed both to have an open space on the map for game masters to come up with their own stuff, but also Landis was not something that had been developed as being important in terms of the overarching development of the setting that was in place at the time. That is vague recollections of things that I think Lou might have said in the past. And,
fair,
more thinking about, well, here are reasons why that's going on. I mean, Landis could be made important if you focus resources and attention on it and make it important.
Yeah.
There is some information that's provided on Landis, not a lot, in the Cara Fahd book. It kind of more fleshes out the history of Landis's relationship with Cara Fahd. Doesn't devote that much to present day, except for the border conflict. And the little bits that are found in the Barsave box set and passing references in some other places. I have not done the reference dive on Landis that I have on Europa, to sidetrack here briefly, back when I kind of was starting work on the planning for the Europa source book, which is still in the very early stages. It was basically going through all of the previously published material and finding all of the references to Europa and pulling them out, collating them together and saying, okay, here's what this paints as a picture of Europa currently. A big chunk of that was from the first edition Serpent River book, but there's a whole bunch of other little things elsewhere. I have not done a similar thing for Landis. I don't know whether the work on Empty Thrones for the Freewater chapter dove too heavily into that.
Fair. That's all right. No, I like the fact that Landis is kind of left out because Thrall's ruled by dwarves. The Serpent River's, kind of the territory of the Tiskrang. The Bloodwood is the territory of the elves. And Cara Fahd, therefore, is the territory of the orcs. And then you had the Troll source book for the Crystal Raiders. And so each race was getting their own, those that could, was getting their own little section of the map to flesh out. Windlings are kind of, a little too sparsely populated as a collective to have their own nation or part of the map.
Yeah, Windlings don't have the numbers or the population center to really necessitate a full-blown book. I think the largest population of Windlings in Barsave is Glenwood Deep, and I don't know that you would necessarily need to devote an entire book to that. And Obsidian likewise are pretty sparsely populated, and they don't have a unified culture the way that Thrall or Cara Fahd or anything like that is.
Yeah. And even Par Length is, kind of the area of the horrors. So they got their own book, their own box set. So anyway, so I like the fact that Cara Fahd got their own source book. It's also a wonderful statement to say that, the most populous former slaves, because other races were enslaved, but not in quite the same numbers the orcs have, as we've covered on the orcs episode. They got to have their own, calling place. They got to have their own meeting and say, no, we're staking our claim here, planted their flag. We're going to recreate Cara Fahd. So they use the old name with the new name, and that kind of does something to the pattern of the geography there as well. But I like the fact that the orcs get their own nation. Gosh darn it. So, they get to bring it back. So we've covered some of the, just like I said, the high points of the geography itself, but the 8 or so tribes that inhabit the central area of Cara Fahd, main city of Claw Ridge is their capital city, but the 8 main ones that are there, the borders between where each tribe ends and begins change daily. So it's one day you're traipsing through there and go, oh, I'm firmly in this territory. No, you're not. Now you're in that territory the next day. It's going to change no matter what. So I love the fact that it's...
A large part of that is driven
nebulous
by the nomadic nature of the orcs that migrated to Cara Fahd in response to Seeds of a Nation, I think is the name of the text that Krathus Gron
You are correct.
wrote. Orcs traditionally, or at least what is sort of presented as the ideal of orc culture when we're talking about orcs, in the same way that we talk about the Highland trolls versus the lowland or city trolls, we've got the orc carads, the nomadic tribes, the horsemen, the cavalrymen of the sort of orc ideal, as opposed to orcs that live normal lives among other name givers. But the historical, cultural background of orcs as nomadic riders carries over to their establishment in Cara Fahd, despite some of Krathusgron's efforts to settle them down. Don't want to use the word civilize them, but to settle them down, to establish a culture, a capital, a city,
society,
a place that they can
functional society
interact with other name giver nations on an equal footing. And the territory that is granted to the orcs that followed her, as well as the one tribe of orcs that was there already, at least one tribe of orcs that was there already, that nomadic nature means that borders are kind of conceptual.
I had the pleasure once upon a time of working with somebody who said that we were building a new company as it was, and all the policies we had were carved in Jell-O, so they could fall apart at any time and then be rebuilt because it's Jell-O. So one of those things.
That's actually not really how Jell-O works, but that's fine.
I know, but that was his phrase to use.
I understand the sentiment.
So it's just
the metaphor gets away from him a little bit at the end there.
It's not mine. Fine. It was his, but it's still fun to say. It stuck with me for all these years. So let's say you are going to bring your traveling band of adventurers, your ne'er-do-wells, into Cara Fahd in hopes of riches and plunder and whatever the hell else you're looking for. Again, 75% populated by orcs. Maybe not the world's best idea, but Cara Fahd has two things you cannot find there. It does not have elemental wood, does not have gold or silver mines. It's mostly iron. So, little interesting tidbits.
Certainly as a prominent resource, I would expect that it is possible within the southern jungles that artisanal elemental wood could be found. Small nodes that an elementalist or a couple of elementalists could use to get true wood. But you would not have the level of the amount that would result in, for lack of a better term, industrial scale elemental wood mining. Certainly not like the exports or the potential for elemental wood that you have in, say, Bloodwood or the Servos jungle or something like that. And that's an interesting question. Is that something that is because the southern jungles, the woodlands of Cara Fahd, are not large enough to provide the mystical gravity that would result in true wood coming into being compared to Bloodwood or the Servos jungle, both of which are much, much larger? Is it something that is perhaps related to its proximity to Death's Sea? I am now suddenly...
I'm with you. I'm blanking on the
curious about
geography.
Something. Hold on.
I just love the fact that there are two active volcanoes constantly with a flow of lava down the slopes into Death's Sea. And it hasn't stopped for, a century or so. And both of those peaks just have the nickname of Death's Eyes, because that's what orcs would call them. So the majority of, at least the introduction to Cara Fahd in the Nations of Barsave, Cara Fahd, is, imagine... There it is. From page 27, I love this little sentence.
Okay.
Hit me.
True wood, proximity to Death's Sea. Very, very high concentration of true fire. You've got the volcanoes and stuff like that. I wanted to make sure before I went spouting my mouth off.
Yeah.
In the litany of the elements, fire destroys wood by burning it. Yes. That is potentially an explanation for why, another theory for perhaps why Cara Fahd does not natively have a significant proportion of true wood. Perhaps it is too close to the massive reserve of true fire, the massive elemental fire gravity well that is Death's Sea, to allow true wood to manifest within its forests and jungles despite their age and wild status.
Yeah, because there's only a narrow, I can't even call it narrow, there's only a river between the mainland of Cara Fahd and the Death's Eyes active volcanoes, which are constantly spewing forth this little trickle of lava to make a new slope every time. So yeah, I imagine maybe if Death's Eyes would stop producing lava, eventually maybe some elemental, some true wood.
I don't know.
would be
Interesting
there, but I don't think
speculation.
so. I'm glad you looked that one up. The initial impression I got from Cara Fahd in the text here about how it's kind of organized and running is more of the concept, I believe, of a boom town during a gold rush or a land grab, as in everybody got there and then the dust is still settling. So it sounds like no one quite knows what's going on. As you said, the borders are all kind of nebulous and indeterminate at all times. My favorite sentence was, imagine a place filled with 100,000 immigrants with no government to speak of, with a desperate need for anything from food to furniture, and no government to leech away the profits.
Yeah.
So it's just get in there and do what you can.
A game based in Cara Fahd could potentially be a game about nation building, which is to say you've got a very, very young nation that is being founded. A return to historically native lands of the orcs. But they have not actually had a nation for centuries. Not only since the Scourge,
like
but during the years of the Scourge, and Cara Fahd fell a while before the Scourge. So you've got a scattered people who have legends and oral traditions about their homeland, the place where they came from, and are inspired by a culture hero who has been blessed and chosen by the passions, by the gods. Okay, I mean, we're talking like parallels here of classical tales and mythology. You've got a culture hero that has been chosen and inspired by the gods to lead these people to their homeland, their long forgotten, their long forsaken homeland, and to rebuild. But of course, you've got the attempt to build a nation among a culture that has, for a very, very long time, been organized around and sort of dominated by a tribal structure. And there is a potentially interesting thematic discussion that can be had there, some interesting ideas that could be explored in terms of what kind of nation is going to be created. Because for the most part, Barsave as a broader culture, when it comes to large-scale governmental organization, only has so many examples to go by. You've got the legacy of the Theron Empire, which is obviously not one that is going to be particularly well looked upon by the orcs. You've got the Kingdom of Thrall, which, while not a negative influence, is not going to be universally loved or seen as an aspirational goal for certain members of the diaspora orc culture. And then you've got other cities, basically. You've got Travar, you've got Jarrus, you've got Europa, you've got Iopos, you've got the Bloodwood. You've got all of these examples that are all different in their own ways, but also kind of similar in that none of them have recent history as a nomadic diaspora.
Yeah.
While Iopos, for example, its founding, its ancient history in terms of how it came to be was as a result of nomadic tribes that would meet at a particular location frequently. And so a more permanent settlement ended up appearing and it grew from there. And similar kinds of things. That's kind of how cities came to be to a certain extent from a cultural development standpoint. You've got a nation that is being created that has in Claw Ridge, in Wirchaz, in its capital, something that is kind of being modeled off of the existing templates for large settlements, whether that's Thrall or Bartertown or Travar or anything like that, especially where you have a significant portion of the population of that area that are orcs that are coming in from those places. City orcs, as the term would be.
Yes.
And then you've got the rest of Cara Fahd kind of divided up between the more traditional nomadic tribes with their interpersonal conflicts and rivalries and ideals and so forth.
Motivations.
The question becomes, what kind of society is going to be built?
Because
you're in the very
if you're
early stages of a new nation that is being created. What are the ideals that they are going to hold to? What are the aspects of traditional orc culture that are going to be maintained? What aspects of other settlements and cultures are going to be adopted? What are the pressures of other places that will want to do business with them going to be? There is actually a interesting potential colonialist kind of idea that you could look into. How does a culture that founded itself, in a sense, by showing up with an army where two other forces were going to fight and saying, no, you're not fighting here. This is our land. Get out. That's the incident at Claw Ridge. That's what happened towards the very tail end of the Prelude to War sequence of events where Cara Fahd was founded. Krathus Gran showed up with a whole bunch of orcs and said, hey, this is our land. This is our sovereign territory. Neither of you are welcome here. Get out. How do they continue to avoid the pressure that is going to be placed on them by Thrall? You know, this huge economic and political powerhouse within the province. With Travar, which is a little bit closer, but also an economic powerhouse. With the Theran Empire, who are certainly not well liked, but a powerhouse off to the south. The Theran War and the driving out of the military might of Thera is certainly something that changes the perspective of that. What about as we start to allude to in Empty Thrones with Freewater and the conflict that's going on there, what about the rising desire for the people in Landis who might want to see themselves unified into a larger, more prominent political entity, as opposed to continuing to be independent villages and so forth, operating in this area that was traditionally a human kingdom? What about the people who were living in Cara Fahd for a while, for generations, but didn't happen to be orcs, and so were removed from their homelands and exiled in a way? I mean, there's a lot of potential interesting socio-political commentary and exploration that can be brought in there.
Well, and then again, you've got one primary race, the orcs, who are coming in, as we said, 75% orcs. How much are they going to allow other races to assimilate or maintain their own culture if they decide to live in Cara Fahd as well? So we've got all that going on.
All of that aside, lest I dissuade anybody from exploring the amazingness that is Cara Fahd. If you are not down with massive socio-political explorations, if you're looking for some more traditional stuff, it is also an area that has a lot of ruins and forgotten history.
I was just going to say.
And areas that you can explore and have more traditional adventures in. Forgotten, abandoned cares.
There were many cares. Some of them don't even have names anymore, so that's another reason to go traipsing around in there. Some of them do have names that were not breached. There's the Werchaz Fortress as well, which is, as you said, in the the capital city of Claw Ridge, which is mostly and I was trying to let people know what things look like, because this is all just text and you have this movie in your mind as to what things look like. Claw Ridge is mostly just haphazard mosaic styles of buildings and construction. Sometimes tents, sometimes wood, sometimes adobe, sometimes brick, kind of go with it as you will. But there is one meeting place in the middle of Claw Ridge called Quick Tree for windlings. All the windlings eventually will meet up in there and hang out for a little while. Maybe not live there, but it's a big freaking tree. It does cause a lot of shade. But yeah, as annoying as orcs find windlings in general, I mean to make a broad generalized statement, they still have a whole big tree for windlings there, and that's not too bad either. So we can get into some of the actual individual cities people might actually get into when they do visit Cara Fahd, as instead of just wandering around aimlessly in the wilderness and whatnot looking for cares, which, believe me, they can. There's a boatload of cares there. Just on the map itself, the ones that are pointed out are plentiful. But there are towns and cities of Mountain's End, which I know it's in and of itself has 41 taverns and 22 inns. There's a huge shrine to Garland there. There is the town of Harvest, which has grain silos 60 feet tall and a newly built water tower. They're working on irrigation there, which is something I've not come across in anything else in all of the writings of Earthdawn. There's the Thunderous Rest, which has 1,500 orcs, mostly belonging to the Broken Fang tribe. So that go there as you will. And then Gavosht, the second largest city, mostly run by Rejruk's foxes. And it's the only planned city in all of Cara Fahd, which sounds weird. It has straight roads, street signs, everything's well laid out on purpose. Otherwise, any other city you go to is going to be just like chaos and like it was planned by somebody who's drunk and riding backwards on a mule. So, thoughts, Josh, on any of the cities that you want to go to, or where they should hit first, maybe, or avoid at all costs?
It depends on what you're looking for. Claw Ridge is probably the best first stopping point because it is the largest community and is the one that, while haphazard and chaotic from an architectural and urban design standpoint, is still probably most familiar as a traditional city, or fantasy city at least, in that regard.
Yeah.
Gavosht is probably a decent second one, although that one is apt to feel a little bit stranger, perhaps because of its planned nature in the otherwise unruly and haphazard nature of orc communities. But it is a little bit more centrally located in terms of Cara Fahd's geography, whereas Claw Ridge is kind of perched up at the northern end of things, kind of a long way from the jungles and the southern border where a lot of the tension and drama can be found.
And not to leave anybody else out, since we mentioned the Quick Tree, where all the windlings kind of congregate in Claw Ridge, there is a Kelpoya Island in the middle of the Locust River, which is mostly inhabited by Tiskrang. So there's a relationship going on there with their neighbors in Cara Fahd, mostly being orcs. There's also the ruins of the original Cara Fahd, which have not been found somewhere in the deep jungle, so that's a possibility to get your team to go there. There's the Black Quarry, which is actually not a quarry itself, but a mining city, which is kind of like New York, the city that never sleeps. It's always got something going on. Nothing ever closes. Mostly Claw Ridge territory as well. There is the Citadel of Earthdawn, which is cursed by Locost and Dis and their war.
Yeah, that is a...
Go ahead, Josh.
secret to a certain extent. It is a ruin located in the southern jungles. It has been discovered by Zaras Icethought, who told her father to go screw and took a bunch of her loyal followers to Cara Fahd because her father, Bronze Eyes, stayed and continued to honor the contract that his cavalry has with Thrall. And so she went to Cara Fahd and is looking to make a name for herself and found these ruins and doesn't really know what the ruins are, but it is the site of a significant battle between the actual passions, Dis and Locost. And so as a result has a lot of really weird residual magical energy going on there, which has resulted in some really weird behavior from Zaras and other folks that are exposed to it for any particular length of time.
Yes. Which you can read about in the book. It's I don't want to give spoilers away, but it's a neat little twist to throw at your party just to go, oh, here's some role playing as an ROLE playing. How good are you with your character in these extremes of emotions and thought processes back and forth. So other places to visit are the Bass Town, which is mostly started by humans many a while ago and is now like 3,000 refugees.
Depending on what era your game is set in. Basstown is actually now part of Freewater, the town that's described in Empty Thrones. Basstown is part of what became Freewater. It's that same area. And so a lot of the stuff that relates to Basstown and the refugees and so forth that's going on with that ties into Freewater and the Long Live the King arc within Empty Thrones.
Fair. So I'm just here to spur Josh on to update us to 4th edition, which is fine by me. There is also, by the way, the Legion of Damnation, which is amassing at the southern end of Cara Fahd. So that's just fun. A group of, nastiness. There's Carip, which is, again, most
Carip is the other piece of Freewater. Freewater is the result of Basstown and Carip coming together to form a single community.
Joining together. Gotcha. And then there is one little wrinkle in all of Cara Fahd, and it's nice burgeoning newness of a country. There is Grim Eyes Crossing, where the Therans are amassing and beginning to train an army.
Yeah, that is...
Or is that still...
something that was, again, remembering that the original Cara Fahd book was something that was written towards the end of phase 2 of the original development.
Mm-hmm.
There was still a significant Theran presence in Vivane province, in Vivane and the surrounding areas. And the conflict that was brewing between the Theran garrison there and Cara Fahd is something that would have led into Barsave at War and been a significant aspect of things there. In the 4th edition timeline, the official bit of 4th edition where things are set, that is no longer a threat. There are still Theran garrisons that are found in some of the forts a little bit beyond Vivane itself. Yeah. And those play a role in the Long Live the King chapter of Empty Thrones. Basically, if you are looking for an update of what the situation sort of is with Cara Fahd, that's what you want to look at. You want to look at the Long Live the King chapter of Empty Thrones. It lays out, certainly not to the extent that the Cara Fahd source book or various things, but it does draw on those earlier source books for inspiration as things that are going on and continuing to be an issue in that area.
It's at least tying things together nicely.
Tying things together and updating things a little bit.
So what's the update, if there is one, on the refuge of Lilasthala?
It sounds familiar, but I'm not immediately.
No, fair. I just wanted to bring it up because it's kind of a cool little entry, and it's near the Dolaris Mountains and the Locust Rivers, and they are really untrusting, and their headman is Gronthan Shorthorns, if that name rings a bell, but they pretty much are not very friendly. They've got archers watching the skies at all time, catapults filled with pepper paste, barrels full of arrows all over the town, and they just don't like a lot of visitors there. So one of those things. But again, places you can go explore with your party and see what they're all about, and plenty of NPCs to throw at people. Just a couple things to keep in mind. That's just the geography and the, as Josh put out, the geopolitical movings and shakings of what Cara Fahd is. Let's not forget, it has its own set of creatures to be wary of as well. Porcupine snakes, lava frogs, the carad cobras, the Qualtech, the Interlock, the Resric horses, the ghost mushrooms. That's just fun to throw at people. Those are slightly poisonous. And by the way, Cara Fahd, even being a new nation, does accept journals from adventurers and adventuring parties, just like they do at the Great Library of Thrall.
To the same extent that the Great Library does, or are they only interested in things related to Cara Fahd?
Mostly in things related to Cara Fahd, but they'll pay you, I think, 60% versus what
they don't have the bankroll
because they don't have the same kind of resources. Couldn't find the word. They don't quite have the same bankroll. But yeah, that's an overview of Cara Fahd. What else you want to throw at us?
Fascinating. I talked for a long time about some of the really cool, interesting stuff that you can do with and about and around Cara Fahd.
I studied the book in Josh's memory about
the former Basstown Resistance. Lilasthala, I grabbed my book and looked it up real quick, is another community on the border of exiles and refugees that were kind of kicked out of Cara Fahd and not happy with the situation. as opposed to being dominantly human, which is what the Basstown situation is. Lelystala is elves and, to a lesser extent, trolls. But it's a very similar kind of situation. It's just not close enough to Basstown/Freewater to be incorporated into that community. They're kind of up towards the more Theron side, but they don't like the Therons either. And then we didn't even get into, with the increased trade and development that is happening in Cara Fahd, that makes a happy target for Crystal Raiders, whether from the Twilight Peaks or the Dolaris Mountains, either side. And you've got the more violent and bloodthirsty tribes, moots of Crystal Raiders on the Cara Fahd border. You've got the Bloodlords there. You've got the other one whose, again, name I can't remember off the top of my head because they aren't the Bloodlords. They're the other ones.
We'll get there when we do Crystal Raiders. Yeah, we'll get there. But no, I love the fact that the map is mostly, I mean, as we said, made for orcs, and this is their new nation. But every other race, aside from maybe dwarves, is well represented in their little tiny pockets of what could be conflict or could be, neighborly in and around Cara Fahd. We just mentioned the trolls. We mentioned the Tiskrang, the elves, the humans at Landis. So, yeah, most of those are represented, and even the
Black Fangs.
The Windlings all meet. The only thing that's missing
Black Fangs.
Blood Fangs.
Bloodlords and Black Fangs.
Black Fangs, that's right. Yeah, the BL and the sibilants and both of those, I can't imagine why you forget them. So it's okay. I'm with you entirely. The source book for Cara Fahd is a wonderful addition to your game. The map itself is a place to explore. There's oodles of things to do, oodles of hazards and conflict to be involved in or avoid. Take your pick. There's plenty of places that are unique enough as far as cities and towns are concerned and communities. And
it's great.
Yeah, like I said,
great.
You could take this map and put it in any other game, in any other role-playing game, period, and just knock yourself out. This is its own little box set away from bar save on its own. So well done to the authors. I love the fact that 4th edition's updated it a little bit for the Empty Thrones, and the fact that it's still, in its infancy as far as a nation's concerned. It's only been aged 10 more years through the 4th edition. So this is a fantastic place. If you've not taken your crew there, you need to. My game master many years ago took us down there once. We completely screwed up the entire reason for being there and were chased out and are not welcome back. So we did not do it right, but we might be able to go back again later on when he wants to pick up the mantle of game master and take us back there. So I hope he does. I think we have learned a lot from that one, but yeah, there is so much to absorb here. An hour doesn't even do it justice. So aside from it being great, any further thoughts on Cara Fahd? Cool.
I said what I wanted to.
Well, we're good. If you have any questions for us about anything else 4th edition might have maybe updated for Cara Fahd, or anything we glossed over that was your favorite part about it, and we'd love to hear your tales about maybe taking your party into or running your party through something in Cara Fahd and mixing and mashing it up.
One other thing, actually, if you want to, Cara Fahd is really fascinating within Earthdawn lore because it is the founding of Cara Fahd, the restoral of Cara Fahd is actually a significant plot arc within the Prelude to War epic. And so depending on when you are setting your game, timeline-wise, and again, timeline is malleable for your own game, whatever, you can shift things around to happen whenever you want. You can, in addition to the whole nation building theme that I talked about for present day Cara Fahd, you can actually have a group be involved in the storylines that lead up to the restoral of Cara Fahd, because it is a significant storyline. The Blades arc, which I have praised on high, the Blades adventure from 1st edition, obviously would take a little bit of work perhaps to update it to 4th edition if you wanted to run it in that rule set. But the storyline itself also ties in significantly with Cara Fahd. And the Cara Fahd sourcebook actually talks about the Blades of Cara Fahd, which are the focus of that adventure series, and how they are an artifact that would be of great importance to the nation. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that can be done with Cara Fahd, past or present, to really involve your group with that, especially if you happen to have an orc heavy group or your group really likes orcs. Mm-hmm. There's just a lot of cool stuff that can be done there.
Yeah, there were 1,000 ideas thrown into one little source book, and there's so much to play with. It should be its own separate little game. Just going to say, right then and there. So if you have any tales of Cara Fahd to send our way, we would love to read them. Maybe you're not on air. Take your pick. We'll do either one you want. So feel free to email us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, it is time for you to go plant your flag, build your own nation with your own legend.
Good night, everybody.